Most people believe happiness is waiting for them on the other side of perfection. When the timing is right. When the money is right. When the job, the relationship, the body, the plan finally becomes flawless. But perfection is a moving target, and the more you chase it, the further happiness seems to drift away. You don't suffer because life is broken. You suffer because you believe life must be perfect before you're allowed to feel at peace. And in that belief, you postpone joy, delay contentment, and trap yourself in constant dissatisfaction. This audiobook is about breaking that illusion, about learning that happiness is not built from perfect circumstances, but from the way you experience the imperfect ones. It is about releasing the endless pressure to get everything right and discovering peace where you already are. Because the moment you stop waiting for everything to be perfect is the moment you finally start living. Chapter 1. The Lie of Perfect Timing. Most people build their lives around a promise that never arrives, the promise that one day the conditions will be just right, and only then will they allow themselves to begin living, believing that happiness, confidence, and peace are waiting on the other side of flawless circumstances. Yet life has no such checkpoint, and while they wait for everything to align, the years quietly pass, carrying their energy, their potential, and their chances with them, until one day they realize they have been standing at the gate of their own life, waiting for permission that never existed. The lie of perfect timing begins early, taught through comparison, expectation, and fear. As people are conditioned to believe that mistakes must be avoided at all costs, that failure is dangerous, and that uncertainty is something to escape. So they postpone action, postpone decisions, and postpone joy, choosing the safety of waiting over the risk of living, not realizing that waiting is the greatest risk of all, because nothing in life grows through delay. Time never becomes perfect, because perfection is not a moment. It is a fantasy created by the mind to avoid discomfort. And as long as you chase that fantasy, you remain trapped in hesitation, watching life move forward without you, while you prepare endlessly for a future that is never ready, because the future is built by imperfect steps taken now, not by flawless plans imagined later. Waiting for perfect timing creates invisible chains, tying your self-worth to external circumstances, making your happiness conditional on things you cannot fully control, such as people's approval, outcomes, opportunities, or moods. And this dependence slowly erodes your confidence, because every delay becomes proof in your mind that you are not yet allowed to be fulfilled, not yet allowed to begin, not yet allowed to believe in yourself. The mind disguises fear as preparation, convincing you that you are being responsible, realistic, or cautious, when in truth you are avoiding the discomfort of uncertainty and the vulnerability of beginning before you feel ready. And this avoidance builds a life of almosts and maybes, full of potential that never finds expression, leaving you with regret that grows heavier each year you choose not to move. Life rewards movement, not perfection, and every person who has ever built something meaningful did so while uncertain, unprepared, and afraid, because growth happens through action, not before it, and the belief that you must first eliminate fear before acting only guarantees that fear will remain in control of your life. The greatest tragedy of the perfect timing lie is that it makes you believe you must earn the right to be happy, as if joy is a reward for achieving enough, proving enough, or becoming enough. Instead of recognizing that happiness is something you practice in the midst of becoming, through the way you meet each moment, regardless of how incomplete or messy your life feels. As long as you wait for perfect timing, you are not truly living your life. You are rehearsing it, running simulations in your head, while the real world continues without your participation, and over time this habit of waiting becomes an identity, the identity of the one who is always preparing, always planning, always almost ready, yet never fully here. Perfect timing never arrives because life is not a schedule, it is a process, and every attempt to freeze it into ideal conditions only creates frustration because life is built from motion, change, and uncertainty. And the more you resist these qualities, the more disconnected you become from the natural rhythm of existence. The belief in perfect timing also poisons your relationship with the present, making you see today as something to endure instead of something to experience, convincing you that your current life is merely a bridge to some imagined future, instead of recognizing that this moment is not a path to happiness, but the place where happiness can be discovered. When you finally abandon the lie of perfect timing, something inside you relaxes, because you no longer carry the pressure of waiting for everything to be fixed before you are allowed to feel alive, and in that release you discover that peace was never locked behind circumstances. It was buried beneath your expectations. You stop asking when your life will begin and start asking how you will show up today, shifting your focus from conditions to choices, from control to participation, from delay to engagement. And this shift alone is enough to transform the entire direction of your life. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the decision to act while fear is present. And once you understand this, the need for perfect timing loses its grip, because you realize that the only moment you ever have to begin is the one you are standing in right now. You begin to trust that clarity comes through movement, that confidence grows through experience, and that the path reveals itself only after you take the first imperfect step, not before. And with this trust, you free yourself from the prison of waiting. The present moment becomes your ally instead of your obstacle, because you are no longer measuring it against some imagined standard of readiness, but using it as the raw material of your becoming, allowing your life to unfold naturally instead of forcing it into a rigid plan. As you practice beginning where you are, with what you have, the illusion of perfect timing fades, replaced by a deeper understanding that life does not ask for perfection. It asks for presence, for honesty, for participation, and for the courage to live while you are still learning. The weight of expectation falls from your shoulders, and you start to feel lighter, freer, and more open to experience. Because you are no longer postponing your existence, no longer saving yourself for later, no longer standing outside your own life. The energy that was once spent waiting now becomes available for living, creating, exploring, and connecting. And with each step you take, your confidence grows, not because the path becomes certain, but because you become stronger. You realize that the cost of waiting has always been higher than the cost of starting, and that every day you delayed was a day you could never recover, a piece of your life offered to fear instead of to possibility. The moment you stop believing in perfect timing, you reclaim your power, because you no longer surrender your present to an imagined future, and in this reclamation, you finally begin living, not someday, not when everything is right, but now, in the only moment that truly belongs to you. When you release the lie of perfect timing, you begin to see how deeply it shaped your decisions, your delays, and your doubts, because almost every moment of hesitation was built on the belief that something outside of you still needed to change before you were allowed to move. And once that belief dissolves, you feel both exposed and liberated, because the responsibility for your life returns fully into your own hands, where it always belonged. You start noticing how often you used future conditions as an excuse to avoid the discomfort of action, telling yourself you would start when you were more confident, more prepared, more supported, more certain, while ignoring the truth that confidence is created by action, preparation is sharpened by experience, and certainty grows only after you have already begun. Each day you live without waiting becomes proof that the life you feared stepping into is actually the life you were meant to inhabit, not a flawless version of it, but the real one, with all its uncertainty, risk, and beauty. And this discovery builds a quiet courage inside you that no external success could ever provide. The present moment becomes less of a problem to escape and more of a place to explore, because you are no longer burdening it with the impossible task of being perfect, but allowing it to be what it is, which is alive, unfinished, and full of possibility. And this permission to exist without judgment transforms your entire experience of being human. You stop comparing your beginning to someone else's middle, recognizing that every path unfolds in its own rhythm, and that the only true failure is refusing to walk yours, because life does not measure you by speed or perfection, but by participation. The more you choose movement over delay, the more you notice how much of your anxiety was built on imagined futures and postponed choices, and how quickly that anxiety loosens its grip when you bring your energy back into action, into learning, into the simple act of showing up. Your relationship with mistakes changes as well, because you no longer see them as signs that you are not ready, but as evidence that you are alive and growing, and each mistake becomes a teacher instead of a judge, guiding you forward instead of pushing you backward. The illusion of perfect timing collapses further when you realize that the people you once admired for their confidence were not waiting for certainty either. They were moving while uncertain, building themselves through trial and error, courage and failure, patience and persistence, exactly the same process you are now allowing yourself to enter. With this new understanding, the future stops feeling like something you must chase and begins to feel like something you are building, one imperfect choice at a time, and this shift removes the weight of expectation that once crushed your motivation. You discover that fulfillment is not found in achieving some distant version of your life, but in engaging deeply with the one you are already living, with all its complexity, challenge, and meaning. And this engagement brings a sense of wholeness that waiting never could. The habit of postponement slowly gives way to the habit of presence, as you learn to meet each day with intention instead of hesitation, curiosity instead of fear, and commitment instead of doubt. And this new way of living reshapes not only what you do, but who you become. Your inner dialogue softens, because you are no longer telling yourself that you are behind, that you are late, that you have missed your chance, but instead reminding yourself that every moment is an opportunity to begin again, to choose differently, to step forward with honesty and courage. As the pressure to get everything right fades, you feel lighter, more open, and more willing to experiment, explore, and evolve, understanding that life is not a test you must pass, but an experience you are here to live. You become more compassionate with yourself, forgiving your past delays and fears, recognizing that you were doing the best you could with the awareness you had at the time, and this compassion becomes the soil in which real growth can finally take root. The energy that once went into waiting now fuels creation, connection, and contribution, allowing you to give more of yourself to the world, instead of holding back in preparation for some future version of you that never needed to exist. You begin trusting that even if things do not unfold the way you imagined, you will learn, adapt, and continue, because your strength no longer comes from perfect conditions, but from your ability to remain engaged with life, regardless of how it unfolds. The path ahead still holds uncertainty, but it no longer frightens you, because you understand that uncertainty is not an enemy, but the very space in which growth, discovery, and transformation occur. And without it, life would remain small, predictable, and empty. Each step you take without waiting becomes a declaration that your life matters now, not later, not after everything is fixed, but in this imperfect, unfinished moment. And this declaration strengthens your sense of purpose and belonging in the world. Over time, the memory of waiting fades, replaced by the lived experience of participation, and you no longer recognize the version of yourself who stood on the sidelines of their own life, because you are now inside it, moving, learning, and becoming. The journey does not become easier, but it becomes real. And in that reality, you find a depth of meaning that no amount of preparation or perfection could ever provide. By continuing to choose life over delay, presence over perfection, and action over fear, you finally free yourself from the lie of perfect timing and step fully into the life that has been waiting for you all along. Chapter 2. Why chasing perfection creates anxiety. Chasing perfection quietly turns life into a constant test that you never pass, because the standards you create in your mind keep moving just beyond your reach, and no matter how much you improve, the feeling of being behind remains, creating a background of tension that never truly fades. As you keep telling yourself that you will finally relax once everything is fixed, once you are flawless, once the conditions become ideal, not realizing that this belief is the very thing keeping your nervous system locked in stress. Perfection creates anxiety because it teaches you that your worth depends on performance, on results, on how closely you match an impossible image of who you think you should be. And every time you fall short of that image, which is inevitable, your mind reacts with fear, self-criticism, and doubt, slowly training your body to live in a state of constant alertness, as if something is always wrong with you or your life. The pursuit of perfection traps you in overthinking, because every decision feels dangerous, every mistake feels catastrophic, and every small imperfection feels like proof of failure, so your mind stays busy trying to control outcomes, predict problems, and eliminate uncertainty, creating mental exhaustion that never allows you to fully rest inside your own existence. Perfectionism feeds anxiety by making the present moment feel unsafe, because you are always evaluating it against a future version of how it should be, and as long as you are measuring life instead of living it, your attention never truly arrives in now, leaving you suspended between what is and what you think should be, which is one of the most uncomfortable states a human being can experience. When you chase perfection, you begin fearing mistakes instead of learning from them, and this fear shrinks your world because you avoid challenges, postpone decisions, and hide from opportunities that might expose your imperfections, slowly constructing a life of limitation and regret in the name of staying safe. Anxiety grows stronger when you believe you must control everything, because perfection demands control, and control is impossible in a world built on change, uncertainty, and complexity. So the more you try to force life into flawless order, the more resistance you meet, and the more anxious you become, locked in a battle you were never meant to win. The mind uses perfection as a shield against vulnerability, telling you that if you can just become good enough, smart enough, strong enough, then you will finally be protected from pain, rejection, and failure. But this promise is false, because pain is part of being alive, and avoiding it only deepens your suffering. As the pressure of perfection builds, your inner dialogue becomes harsher, more critical, and less forgiving, and this constant self-judgment creates emotional fatigue, leaving you drained even when you are not physically doing much, because the real work is happening inside your head, where you are constantly trying to measure up to a standard that no human being can maintain. Perfection also damages your relationships, because you begin expecting others to meet the same impossible standards you place on yourself, creating disappointment, frustration, and distance, as you struggle to accept the natural flaws of real people in a world that is inherently imperfect. The more you chase perfection, the more you delay your happiness, believing that joy must be earned through flawless achievement, and this belief turns life into a waiting room where you are always preparing for some future moment when you will finally allow yourself to feel content while the present continues slipping quietly past. Anxiety thrives on this waiting because your mind never settles, never rests, never feels complete, always scanning for what is missing or what could go wrong, keeping your body in a state of constant tension that slowly wears down your health, your focus, and your emotional balance. Letting go of perfection does not mean lowering your standards. It means releasing the belief that you must be flawless in order to be worthy, peaceful, or fulfilled, and this release immediately lightens your inner world, creating space for calm, creativity, and authentic growth. When you accept imperfection, your nervous system relaxes, because the pressure to perform dissolves, and you begin approaching life with curiosity instead of fear, allowing mistakes to become teachers and challenges to become opportunities rather than threats. Your mind becomes quieter when perfection no longer rules your life, because there is no longer a constant need to evaluate, compare, and correct everything. And in this quiet, you rediscover the simple pleasure of existing without judgment. You start showing up more fully because you are no longer hiding behind preparation and perfectionism. And this willingness to participate in life as you are deepens your confidence, not because you feel perfect, but because you feel real. As you continue releasing the chase for perfection, anxiety loses its foundation because you stop demanding certainty, stop fearing mistakes, and stop measuring your worth by impossible standards, choosing instead to live with honesty, presence, and self-respect. Your days feel lighter, your mind feels clearer, and your heart feels more open, because you are no longer fighting the natural flow of life, but moving with it, learning from it, and growing through it. You realize that peace was never waiting at the end of perfection. It was buried beneath the pressure you placed on yourself, and the moment you remove that pressure, peace rises naturally. The more you allow life to be imperfect, the more you discover how deeply beautiful it already is, not because it is flawless, but because it is alive, evolving, and real. By abandoning the chase for perfection, you free yourself from anxiety, return to your natural state of balance, and finally begin living with ease instead of fear. When you stop chasing perfection, you begin noticing how much emotional energy was being wasted on trying to meet standards that were never truly yours. And this awareness alone creates a deep sense of relief, because for the first time in a long while, you are no longer fighting yourself in order to feel acceptable, and this inner truce becomes the foundation of genuine peace. You start allowing yourself to exist as you are, without the constant urge to fix, correct, or improve every part of your being. And this permission to be human softens your inner world, replacing self-criticism with self-respect and opening the door to real healing. The mind slowly learns that it does not need to be on guard at all times, because mistakes are no longer interpreted as disasters, but as natural steps in the process of becoming. And this shift calms the nervous system, allowing your body to release the tension it has been carrying for years. As perfection loosens its grip, your creativity awakens, because you are no longer afraid of producing something that is incomplete or imperfect. And this freedom encourages exploration, experimentation, and expression, making your work feel alive again instead of heavy and restrictive. You also become more resilient, because you are no longer shattered by failure or criticism, understanding that neither defines your worth, and this resilience gives you the courage to keep moving forward, even when the path feels uncertain or difficult. Your relationships grow stronger as well, because you stop expecting perfection from others, learning instead to appreciate their presence, their effort, and their authenticity, which deepens connection and reduces conflict born from unrealistic expectations. Life becomes more spacious when perfection no longer occupies your mind, because you are not constantly scanning for what is wrong or what needs to be fixed, and this mental space allows you to enjoy simple moments without analysis or pressure. You begin trusting yourself more, because you no longer need to prove your worth through flawless performance. And this trust creates a quiet confidence that remains steady even when things go wrong. The future stops feeling like a threat because you are no longer demanding that everything turn out exactly as planned, and this acceptance brings a sense of freedom that anxiety can never survive within. Each day becomes an opportunity to participate fully in life rather than an obligation to perform, and this shift transforms the way you experience work, relationships, and personal growth. You notice how much lighter your heart feels, how much clearer your mind becomes, and how much more energy you have for the things that truly matter, simply because you are no longer carrying the impossible burden of perfection. Your inner dialogue becomes kinder, replacing harsh judgment with understanding, and this compassion creates emotional safety within yourself, allowing you to face challenges with strength instead of fear. As you continue releasing perfection, you rediscover joy in progress rather than only in outcomes, finding satisfaction in effort, learning, and growth, which makes every step of your journey meaningful. Your sense of purpose deepens because you are no longer chasing an ideal image, but living in alignment with your values and intentions, allowing your life to unfold naturally and honestly. You stop postponing happiness, realizing that peace is not something you earn after getting everything right, but something you choose in the midst of getting better. The world feels less overwhelming because you are no longer demanding control over what cannot be controlled, and this surrender brings calm into even the most uncertain situations. You become more present because your attention is no longer trapped in worry about being enough or doing enough, and this presence reconnects you with the simple beauty of being alive. Confidence grows from within, not because you feel perfect, but because you feel grounded in who you are, no longer depending on flawless performance for validation. Your life becomes richer because you are finally living it instead of trying to perfect it. By continuing to let go of the chase for perfection, you free yourself from anxiety, return to your natural state of balance, and allow happiness to rise where it has always belonged, in the imperfect reality of your everyday life. Chapter 3. Happiness doesn't come from conditions. Happiness disappears the moment you attach it to conditions, because conditions are never stable, never final, and never fully under your control. And when your sense of peace depends on things going a certain way, you surrender your emotional life to forces that change constantly, leaving you in a permanent state of waiting for circumstances to improve before you allow yourself to feel whole. From an early age, most people are taught that happiness is something they will earn later, after achieving enough, becoming enough, or fixing enough about themselves and their lives, and this belief quietly trains the mind to postpone joy, convincing you that your present is only valuable as a bridge to a future that never quite arrives. When happiness is conditional, every obstacle feels heavier, because it threatens the image of the life you believe you must create before you are allowed to relax. And this pressure builds frustration, resentment, and anxiety, making your inner world restless even when your external life appears successful. Conditions also trap you in comparison, because you are constantly measuring your life against what others have, what they have achieved, or how they appear to be living, and this habit slowly erodes your contentment, replacing it with the sense that something is always missing or wrong with you. The truth is that happiness does not come from perfect circumstances, because even when circumstances improve, the mind immediately creates new conditions, new expectations, and new demands, keeping you chasing a finish line that continues moving further away. Happiness grows from your relationship with the present moment, from the way you experience your thoughts, your emotions, and your daily life, not from the external details of your situation, which will always shift and change. When you stop tying your peace to conditions, you begin discovering that joy is something you cultivate from within, through acceptance, gratitude, and presence, regardless of whether life feels complete or unfinished. This shift removes enormous pressure from your life, because you are no longer asking the world to be perfect before you are allowed to feel alive. And in that release, your heart softens and your mind becomes calmer. You start to see challenges not as barriers to happiness, but as part of the texture of being human. Experiences that deepen you, teach you, and strengthen you, rather than obstacles that must be eliminated before you can finally feel okay. The more you practice finding peace in the middle of imperfection, the more resilient you become, because your happiness is no longer fragile, no longer dependent on outcomes, and no longer vulnerable to every unexpected change. As your inner world stabilizes, your confidence grows, not because life becomes predictable, but because you trust yourself to remain grounded even when it is not. Your relationships improve as well, because you stop expecting others to fulfill your emotional needs or create the conditions for your happiness, taking responsibility instead for the way you experience your own life. Work becomes more meaningful, because you are no longer chasing success as a way to finally feel whole, but expressing yourself through your efforts with presence and integrity. You notice how much lighter your days feel when you stop postponing joy and start allowing yourself to experience small moments of peace, connection, and contentment right where you are. The habit of waiting dissolves, replaced by the understanding that life is not a destination to reach, but a process to live. And happiness is something you practice along the way. As this understanding deepens, fear of the future weakens, because your peace is no longer stored in some imagined outcome, but rooted in your ability to remain present with whatever life brings. You stop measuring your life by what it lacks and start appreciating what it holds. And this shift transforms the way you see the world, yourself, and your place within it. The more you live this way, the more you realize that happiness was never hiding in conditions. It was waiting for you to stop demanding perfection from life and start meeting it with openness and trust. Your inner world becomes a place of safety instead of struggle, and this inner safety allows you to engage with life fully, courageously, and authentically. By releasing the belief that happiness comes from conditions, you reclaim your power, return to your natural state of balance, and finally allow yourself to live with peace, no matter what is happening around you. When happiness is no longer tied to conditions, you begin noticing how much of your energy was once trapped in constant evaluation of your life, judging whether each moment was good enough, successful enough, meaningful enough. And this habit of judging quietly poisoned your experience, because you were rarely present for what you were living, always measuring it instead. And the moment you stop measuring, you start experiencing, and in that shift, the world becomes softer and more welcoming. You discover that happiness grows in simple places you once overlooked, in quiet mornings, in ordinary conversations, in moments of stillness, in the feeling of breathing without urgency. And as your attention settles into these spaces, you realize that joy has always been woven into the fabric of everyday life, waiting for you to slow down enough to notice it. This new way of living transforms your sense of time, because you are no longer racing toward future milestones in the hope that they will finally complete you, and instead you begin valuing the unfolding of each day as it comes, which brings a deep sense of richness that no achievement ever could. You become less attached to outcomes, because your well-being no longer rises and falls with success or failure, and this emotional independence makes you more courageous, more creative, and more willing to take risks, knowing that your happiness does not depend on the result. Your inner dialogue becomes gentler, because you are no longer demanding that your life prove itself worthy before you allow yourself to feel at peace. And this gentleness builds emotional safety inside you, making it easier to face challenges without collapsing into fear or self-doubt. You start responding to difficulties with steadiness instead of panic, because your happiness is no longer fragile, and this steadiness becomes one of your greatest strengths allowing you to navigate uncertainty with patience and intelligence. The more you live this way, the more you trust life, not because you believe it will always go according to plan, but because you trust your ability to remain present and balanced no matter how it unfolds. And this trust replaces anxiety with quiet confidence. Your relationships grow more authentic because you are no longer using people as sources of happiness or emotional stability, and instead you meet them as complete within yourself, offering connection without dependency and love without pressure. Work becomes an expression of who you are, rather than a desperate attempt to prove your worth. And this shift makes your efforts feel meaningful, aligned, and deeply satisfying. Even on days when nothing extraordinary happens, you notice how much calmer your mind feels when you stop chasing conditions, because the endless planning, worrying, and comparing begins to fade. And in its place appears a spaciousness that allows you to breathe more freely inside your own life. This spaciousness gives rise to creativity, because when the mind is no longer trapped in the struggle for happiness, it becomes open, curious, and playful, allowing new ideas and perspectives to flow naturally. Your body also responds to this change, releasing years of stored tension, because the pressure to perform, achieve, and become enough begins to dissolve, and with it the chronic stress that once lived in your muscles, your breath, and your heartbeat. You begin sleeping more deeply, waking more peacefully, and moving through your days with a sense of ease that once felt impossible, simply because your nervous system is no longer living in constant anticipation of when happiness will finally arrive. Gratitude grows effortlessly because you are no longer focused on what is missing, but on what is present. And this shift transforms even the most ordinary moments into sources of quiet joy and contentment. You stop postponing your life, realizing that there is no perfect future waiting to begin your happiness, and that the only life you will ever have is the one you are living right now, in this imperfect, unfolding moment. The more you embrace this truth, the more alive you feel, because you are no longer standing outside your own existence, waiting for permission to enjoy it, but stepping fully into it with open eyes and open heart. Your sense of identity becomes more stable, because you no longer define yourself by circumstances, achievements, or external validation, but by your ability to remain present, grounded, and at peace with who you are becoming. This stability allows you to handle both success and failure with grace, because neither has the power to determine your happiness anymore. And this emotional freedom gives you a rare sense of independence that few people ever experience. As you continue living this way, happiness becomes less of a goal and more of a way of being, something that flows naturally through your life instead of something you must chase, earn, or defend. In releasing the belief that happiness comes from conditions, you return to your natural state of balance, allowing peace, clarity, and contentment to rise from within and guide you through every season of your life. Chapter 4. Let go of control and find peace. Trying to control life is one of the greatest sources of inner suffering, because life is not something that can be fully managed, predicted, or forced into perfect order. And the more you resist this truth, the more tension you create inside yourself, as your mind fights constantly against what is, demanding that everything follow your expectations instead of allowing existence to unfold naturally. Control gives the illusion of safety, making you believe that if you can just arrange enough pieces of your life the right way, you will finally feel secure, calm, and at peace. But this sense of safety is fragile because it depends on circumstances that are always changing, and when they inevitably do, the anxiety returns stronger than before. The need for control often grows from fear, from the mind's attempt to protect you from uncertainty, pain, and loss. Yet the paradox is that this attempt at protection is what keeps you in a state of constant tension, because the mind can never truly relax while it believes it must manage everything. Letting go of control does not mean becoming passive or careless. It means recognizing the limits of your influence and choosing to stop exhausting yourself by trying to command what is beyond your reach. And this recognition brings an immediate sense of relief, because your shoulders no longer carry the weight of the entire world. When you loosen your grip on control, you begin to notice how much of your stress was created by your resistance to reality, not by reality itself. And this insight changes the way you experience difficulties, because instead of fighting them, you meet them with openness and intelligence. The more you allow life to unfold, the more you realize that peace is not something you create through force, but something that emerges when you stop interfering with the natural flow of events, trusting that you can respond to whatever arises without needing to predict or prevent everything in advance. Letting go of control softens your inner dialogue, because you are no longer constantly judging whether things are going according to plan. And this softening brings emotional ease, making it easier to breathe, think, and move through your days with clarity. Your relationships transform as well, because you stop trying to manage how others feel, think, or behave, allowing them the same freedom you are learning to give yourself. And this mutual respect creates deeper trust and connection. When control loosens, creativity awakens, because you are no longer bound by rigid expectations of how things must be. And this openness allows new ideas, solutions, and possibilities to appear that your controlling mind would never have allowed. The habit of surrender grows stronger with practice, and as you continue choosing acceptance over resistance, your nervous system begins to settle, because it no longer feels under constant threat from uncertainty. You start sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more balanced, simply because you are no longer carrying the exhausting responsibility of trying to hold the universe together. As you live with less control, you discover a deeper trust in yourself, knowing that you can meet challenges with presence and wisdom without needing everything to be predictable or safe in advance. This trust becomes your new foundation, replacing anxiety with confidence and fear with steady calm, because you are no longer relying on control for security, but on your own capacity to remain grounded in any situation. You also develop greater compassion for yourself, recognizing that perfection and control were never realistic expectations, and this compassion allows you to forgive your mistakes and continue forward without shame. Life becomes more fluid and enjoyable because you are no longer battling each moment, but moving with it, allowing experiences to come and go without clinging or resistance. The present moment becomes a place of refuge instead of a problem to fix, and in this refuge you find a sense of peace that does not depend on external circumstances. Your heart opens as you release control, because you are no longer closed by fear, and this openness allows you to experience life more fully, with curiosity, wonder, and gratitude. You begin to see that control was never the source of your strength, but your ability to remain aware, present, and responsive, and this awareness becomes the true foundation of your inner power. As you continue letting go, you find yourself living with greater ease, deeper peace, and a sense of belonging within your own life that you once believed could only come after everything was fixed. By surrendering the need to control, you finally discover the peace you were searching for, not somewhere in the future, but here, in the unfolding of each imperfect moment. When you continue practicing the release of control, you begin to notice how many of your worries were based on imagined futures rather than present realities. And as your attention returns to what is actually happening instead of what might happen, your mind grows quieter and your heart steadier, because you are no longer feeding fear with endless mental scenarios. This new way of living strengthens your ability to remain calm in uncertainty, because you stop expecting life to provide guarantees before you feel safe, and instead, you learn to create safety within yourself through awareness, acceptance, and trust, which becomes a powerful source of emotional stability. The more you allow things to be as they are, the more you realize that resistance was the true source of your suffering, not the events themselves. And this realization frees you from the habit of fighting reality, allowing peace to arise naturally in even the most challenging circumstances. As control loosens, you develop a deeper relationship with patience because you stop rushing life to meet your expectations, and this patience allows you to observe situations more clearly, respond more wisely, and move through difficulties with grace rather than force. You begin noticing how much lighter your body feels when it is no longer carrying the tension of constant mental struggle, and this physical ease becomes a mirror of the emotional freedom growing within you. Letting go of control also deepens your self-awareness, because without the need to manage everything, you have space to observe your thoughts, feelings, and reactions more honestly, and this awareness becomes the foundation of real personal growth. You stop measuring your life by how much you can control and start valuing how fully you can experience each moment, which shifts your priorities from power to presence, from certainty to connection. As this shift takes root, your confidence becomes quieter and more grounded, because it no longer depends on outcomes, and this grounded confidence allows you to face both success and failure without losing your inner balance. Your relationships benefit from this transformation because you no longer impose rigid expectations on others, allowing them to be who they are, and this acceptance creates space for genuine connection and mutual respect. You discover that surrender does not weaken you, but strengthens you, because it removes the unnecessary burden of trying to force life into shape, freeing your energy for creativity, compassion, and meaningful action. With each day you practice this way of living, your mind becomes less reactive, your emotions more stable, and your presence more consistent, making it easier to navigate the complexities of life without feeling overwhelmed. You begin trusting the flow of life, not because you believe everything will always go well, but because you trust your ability to remain steady and aware, no matter what unfolds. This trust transforms fear into curiosity, because instead of bracing for what might go wrong, you become open to discovering what might emerge, and this openness brings a sense of adventure into your experience of being alive. The more you release control, the more you realize how much of your previous effort was unnecessary, and how much of your life can be lived with ease when you stop interfering with its natural rhythm. You start responding to challenges with intelligence rather than panic, because you are no longer attached to fixed outcomes, and this flexibility allows you to adapt, learn, and grow in ways that rigid control never could. Your inner world becomes a place of calm observation instead of constant struggle, and this inner calm spills into every part of your life, improving your health, your focus, and your sense of purpose. You become more compassionate with yourself because you recognize that trying to control everything was a survival strategy, not a flaw, and this compassion allows you to release old patterns without self-judgment. As control continues to dissolve, you feel more connected to life because you are no longer standing outside of it trying to manage it, but participating fully in its unfolding. You realize that peace does not come from arranging life perfectly, but from learning how to remain present and open within it, and this understanding becomes the quiet wisdom that guides you forward. In letting go of control, you do not lose your strength, you discover it, because true strength is the ability to remain grounded, aware, and peaceful in the midst of life's uncertainty. Chapter 5. How expectations steal your joy. Expectations quietly shape the way you experience life, because they create a mental image of how things should be, and the moment reality fails to match that image, disappointment appears, not because something is truly wrong, but because your mind refuses to accept what is, choosing instead to compare it with what it imagined, and in that comparison, joy begins to disappear. Most people do not realize that their unhappiness is not caused by events themselves, but by the distance between what happens and what they expected to happen, and this distance becomes the birthplace of frustration, sadness, resentment, and emotional exhaustion that slowly drains the beauty from everyday life. Expectations make you emotionally dependent on outcomes, teaching you that you will only feel satisfied when things go your way, and this dependence creates vulnerability because life rarely unfolds exactly as planned, leaving you in a constant cycle of hope followed by disappointment. When you carry strong expectations, you stop meeting life as it is and start resisting it, and this resistance builds inner tension, making it impossible to feel at peace even when nothing is truly wrong in the present moment. You begin to notice how expectations affect your relationships because you start measuring people by what they should do rather than appreciating who they are. And this habit creates conflict, misunderstanding, and emotional distance as reality repeatedly fails to satisfy your mental demands. The more you cling to expectations, the more fragile your happiness becomes because it rests on conditions that you cannot fully control, and every unexpected change feels like a personal attack on your peace. Expectations also distort your perception of success because you are never truly satisfied with progress, always focusing on what is missing instead of what has been achieved, and this mindset turns even accomplishments into sources of stress. As you begin letting go of rigid expectations, you feel an immediate sense of relief because the constant pressure of comparison dissolves, allowing you to experience moments as they are instead of judging them against impossible standards. Joy begins returning to your life, not because everything becomes perfect, but because you stop demanding that it be, and in this release you rediscover the quiet pleasure of simple things, of being alive without conditions. When expectations loosen, your mind becomes softer, your heart more open, and your emotional world more balanced, because you are no longer fighting against reality, but moving with it. You start trusting life instead of trying to manage it, understanding that uncertainty is not your enemy, but a natural part of existence, and this trust allows you to navigate challenges with calm instead of resistance. Your relationships improve as expectations fade, because you meet people with acceptance rather than demands, creating space for genuine connection, compassion, and understanding. Work becomes more fulfilling because you focus on effort and growth rather than perfect results, and this shift removes much of the anxiety that once followed you through your days. The present moment becomes more enjoyable because you are no longer waiting for it to match some future ideal, but experiencing it fully as it unfolds. Letting go of expectations teaches you emotional maturity because you learn how to feel without being controlled by your feelings, how to hope without attaching your peace to outcomes, and how to live without constantly negotiating with life. You become more resilient because disappointment no longer breaks you, and challenges no longer feel like the end of the world, but simply part of the journey you are walking. Your inner world becomes quieter because there is less arguing with reality and more listening to it, and this quiet allows wisdom, clarity, and intuition to emerge naturally. You discover that joy is not something you chase, but something you allow, and this allowance transforms the way you experience both success and struggle. As expectations continue to dissolve, gratitude rises, because you begin noticing what is already present instead of what is missing, and this gratitude nourishes your heart and mind. By releasing expectations, you stop stealing joy from your own life and finally allow yourself to live with openness, peace, and emotional freedom. As expectations fade, you begin noticing how much emotional energy you once spent negotiating with life, constantly checking whether each moment met your standards. And this awareness alone brings relief, because you are no longer carrying the invisible weight of mental comparison that once followed you everywhere. You discover that life becomes gentler when you stop demanding that it conform to your desires, and instead allow it to unfold with curiosity and acceptance, creating a sense of ease that makes even difficult days feel manageable. Your inner dialogue softens as expectations dissolve, replacing constant judgment with understanding, and this kindness toward yourself becomes the foundation of emotional healing and growth. You start experiencing the present moment more fully, because you are no longer distracted by how it should be, allowing you to appreciate the small details that once went unnoticed, such as quiet mornings, simple conversations, and moments of stillness. Relationships become more authentic because you stop placing conditions on others and begin meeting them with openness, creating space for deeper trust and connection. You find that disappointment loses its grip on you because it no longer feels personal or devastating, but simply part of the natural rhythm of life, which you learn to navigate with grace. As you release expectations, you gain emotional independence because your happiness is no longer controlled by external circumstances, but rooted in your ability to remain present and grounded. This independence brings confidence, not from knowing how things will turn out, but from trusting yourself to handle whatever unfolds with strength and clarity. Your days feel lighter because you are no longer burdened by constant mental demands, and this lightness allows creativity, joy, and peace to flow more freely through your life. You begin noticing how much of your past suffering was created not by events themselves, but by your refusal to accept them, and this insight opens the door to true forgiveness, both for yourself and for others. Forgiveness becomes easier because you are no longer holding life hostage to your expectations, and this release of resentment frees your heart from unnecessary pain. You stop postponing happiness, realizing that there is no perfect version of life waiting in the future, only this unfolding moment where your real life is happening. The more you live this way, the more you trust the process of life, not because it is always kind, but because you have learned how to meet it with awareness and resilience. Your sense of identity stabilizes because you are no longer defining yourself by what you have or what you have not achieved, but by the way you experience your own existence. As emotional pressure fades, your health improves because your body is no longer living in constant tension created by mental struggle. You become more patient because you understand that growth takes time and that every step matters, even when it feels small. You start responding to challenges with wisdom instead of frustration, because you no longer see them as violations of how life should be, but as opportunities to learn and evolve. Your inner world becomes a place of calm observation instead of emotional chaos, allowing you to think clearly and act intentionally. With each passing day, your life feels more aligned, not because everything is perfect, but because you are no longer at war with reality. By continuing to release expectations, you stop stealing joy from yourself and allow peace, clarity, and contentment to become the natural state of your everyday life. Chapter 6. Learn to live with imperfection. Living with imperfection is not a weakness, it is the highest form of wisdom, because it means you are no longer fighting the nature of life, which is unfinished, unpredictable, and constantly evolving. And the moment you stop demanding perfection from yourself and the world, you begin to feel a sense of relief that no achievement could ever provide. Most people spend their lives trying to correct, fix, and perfect themselves, believing that something is fundamentally wrong with who they are, and this belief creates endless tension because the self they are chasing is an illusion that keeps changing, ensuring that satisfaction always remains out of reach. Imperfection is the raw material of growth because it exposes where learning, adaptation, and transformation are needed, and without imperfection, there would be no movement, no curiosity, and no reason to become anything more than you already are. When you accept imperfection, your mind relaxes because it no longer needs to maintain impossible standards, and this relaxation creates space for creativity, clarity, and peace to emerge naturally. Learning to live with imperfection teaches compassion because you begin to see yourself and others as works in progress rather than finished products, and this perspective softens your heart and strengthens your relationships. The pressure to perform perfectly dissolves, and in its place appears a quiet confidence that comes from knowing you are allowed to make mistakes, stumble, learn, and continue without losing your sense of worth. Imperfection makes life real because it introduces texture, depth, and meaning into every experience, transforming challenges into teachers and setbacks into stepping stones. When you stop hiding your flaws, you stop hiding from life. And this honesty creates authenticity, allowing you to show up as you are rather than as you think you should be. You discover that peace does not come from eliminating imperfection, but from embracing it, because resistance only multiplies suffering, while acceptance brings calm. Living with imperfection strengthens your resilience, because you no longer collapse when things go wrong, understanding instead that difficulty is part of the journey, not a sign that you have failed. As you practice this acceptance, your inner dialogue becomes kinder, replacing harsh judgment with understanding, and this kindness becomes the foundation of lasting emotional health. You stop postponing your life, because you realize there is no perfect moment waiting in the future, only the imperfect moment where your life is happening right now. Your energy shifts from self-criticism to self-respect, allowing you to grow without self-destruction, to improve without self-hatred, and to evolve without fear. The more you allow yourself to be imperfect, the more confident you become, because your confidence is no longer fragile or dependent on performance, but rooted in authenticity. Your relationships deepen because people feel safe around someone who is honest about their humanity, and this honesty invites trust, connection, and mutual understanding. You begin enjoying the process of becoming, rather than obsessing over the result, and this enjoyment makes the journey of life lighter and more meaningful. Imperfection teaches patience, because you stop expecting immediate results and start honoring gradual progress, recognizing that growth unfolds over time. As you continue living this way, your life feels less like a performance and more like an experience, something to be lived fully rather than judged constantly. You realize that the beauty of life lies in its flaws, in its uncertainty, in its unfinished nature, and this realization fills your days with wonder instead of anxiety. By learning to live with imperfection, you free yourself from unnecessary suffering and open the door to a deeper, steadier, and more genuine happiness. When you continue embracing imperfection, you begin to notice how much of your previous suffering was created by the impossible expectation that life should always make sense, feel good, and unfold according to plan. And this awareness allows you to release the need for constant certainty, replacing it with a quiet trust in your ability to navigate whatever appears. You start treating mistakes as valuable information instead of evidence of failure, and this shift transforms how you learn, grow, and evolve, because every experience becomes part of your education rather than a judgment of your worth. Your mind grows calmer as you stop arguing with reality, because you no longer demand that every situation meet your standards before you allow yourself to feel at peace. And this surrender creates emotional balance. You become more flexible because you no longer cling to rigid ideas of how things should be, and this flexibility allows you to adapt to change with intelligence and grace. Relationships become less stressful because you accept others as they are instead of trying to mold them into ideal versions, and this acceptance creates space for real connection to flourish. You discover that progress is rarely linear, and that setbacks do not erase your growth, but deepen it, making your journey richer and more meaningful. Your inner voice becomes supportive rather than critical, encouraging you forward instead of tearing you down, and this encouragement strengthens your confidence from within. As perfection loosens its grip, you feel lighter, freer, and more willing to explore new possibilities without the fear of doing things wrong. You stop waiting for permission to live, realizing that your life does not require flawless conditions to begin, only your presence and participation. The more you practice this way of living, the more you trust yourself, because you see that you can survive mistakes, learn from them, and continue moving forward. Your days become less about proving yourself and more about expressing yourself. And this expression brings a sense of fulfillment that performance never could. You grow more patient with your own process, understanding that becoming who you are meant to be takes time, experience, and compassion. You begin enjoying your journey instead of constantly measuring how far you still have to go, and this enjoyment makes life feel richer and more complete. Your emotional world stabilizes because you are no longer swinging between pride and shame, success and failure, but standing steady in self-respect. As you continue living with imperfection, you feel more connected to others because you recognize your shared humanity and common struggles. You stop fearing change because you understand that growth requires movement, uncertainty, and adaptation. The present moment becomes more precious because you are no longer postponing your happiness until everything is fixed, but allowing yourself to live fully in the now. You discover that true strength lies not in being flawless, but in being real, resilient, and open to life. With each day, your sense of peace deepens because you are no longer fighting who you are or the world around you. By continuing to live with imperfection, you build a life grounded in authenticity, compassion, and quiet confidence. Chapter 7. Stop postponing your happiness. Most people unknowingly build their lives around waiting, believing that happiness is something that will finally arrive after enough effort, enough sacrifice, enough progress, and enough success. And in doing so, they turn their present into a temporary holding space rather than the place where life is actually meant to be lived, which creates a constant sense of restlessness, because no matter how much they achieve, the moment of arrival never truly comes. Postponing happiness trains the mind to believe that joy must be earned through future conditions instead of practiced in the present moment. And this belief keeps people running on an invisible treadmill, exhausting themselves while telling themselves that fulfillment is just a little further ahead, without realizing that this pattern prevents them from ever fully experiencing their own lives. When you delay your happiness, you are teaching yourself that today is not good enough, that who you are now is not enough, and that the life you are living must be endured rather than appreciated, which slowly erodes your sense of meaning and replaces it with constant dissatisfaction. This habit of waiting becomes so familiar that many people stop noticing it, living their entire lives in preparation for a future that never arrives, while the moments that make up their real existence quietly pass them by, unnoticed and unlived. The mind uses postponement as a shield against uncertainty, convincing you that you must fix everything before you are allowed to relax, feel peaceful, or enjoy yourself. But this promise is false, because there will always be something else to fix, improve, or worry about. Happiness does not appear when your life becomes perfect. It appears when you stop demanding perfection from life. And the moment you recognize this, you begin to reclaim the present as your true home, instead of a waiting room. Postponing happiness also keeps you trapped in fear, because your emotional state becomes dependent on circumstances that are always changing, leaving you vulnerable to anxiety, disappointment, and chronic stress. When you finally choose to stop waiting, you feel an immediate shift inside, because you are no longer withholding life from yourself. And this release creates space for peace, contentment, and quiet joy to rise naturally. You begin noticing how much of your suffering was self-created, not because life was unbearable, but because you refused to allow yourself to experience it fully, believing that something better was always required before you could feel okay. Each time you choose presence over postponement, you strengthen your emotional independence, because your happiness becomes rooted in how you experience the moment, rather than what the moment gives you. Your days become richer, because you stop rushing through them toward imagined futures and start living inside them with attention, curiosity, and gratitude. Relationships improve when you stop postponing happiness, because you no longer place the responsibility for your emotional fulfillment on others, and instead meet them from a place of wholeness rather than need. You stop exhausting yourself by chasing arrival points, recognizing that life is not a destination to reach, but a journey to participate in, and this shift transforms your entire experience of being alive. The more you practice living this way, the more confident you become, because your sense of well-being no longer depends on achieving specific outcomes, but on your ability to remain present and grounded. Fear of the future weakens as you stop storing your happiness in it, and this release allows you to face uncertainty with calm instead of panic. You begin trusting life, not because it becomes predictable, but because you trust yourself to meet it with awareness, patience, and strength. As postponement dissolves, gratitude grows, because you start seeing what is already here, instead of obsessing over what is missing. Your inner world becomes quieter, because the constant mental negotiation with life begins to fade, replaced by acceptance and peace. You discover that joy was never missing from your life. It was hidden beneath your conditions and expectations. By choosing to stop postponing happiness, you finally step fully into the life that has been waiting for you all along. You slowly realize that postponing happiness was never protecting you. It was draining you, because every time you delayed your joy, you were teaching your mind that life itself was something to be endured rather than embraced. And this belief quietly shaped every decision, making you more cautious, more distant, and less alive inside your own experience. When you stop postponing happiness, you stop bargaining with life, and this ends the constant inner struggle between where you are and where you think you should be, allowing your energy to return to the present moment, where it becomes available for growth, creativity, and connection, instead of being trapped in mental waiting. Your body begins to relax when you live this way, because it no longer feels the pressure of carrying an unfinished life on its shoulders. And as your nervous system calms, your thoughts slow, your breath deepens, and your emotional world becomes steadier. You begin to understand that many of your fears were built on the assumption that life would eventually become safe enough for you to feel at peace. But real peace only arrives when you stop demanding safety from the future and start cultivating it within the present. Every time you choose to experience joy now instead of later, you rewire your relationship with existence, replacing scarcity with sufficiency, pressure with presence, and anxiety with acceptance. You stop living as if your life is on hold, and this single shift changes the way you walk, speak, listen, and engage with the world, because you are finally inside your own life, instead of standing on the outside waiting for it to begin. Your sense of purpose grows stronger when you stop postponing happiness, because you realize that meaning is not something you reach at the end of a journey. It is something you create in how you live each step of the way. You become more resilient, because your emotional stability is no longer dependent on external achievements, and this independence allows you to navigate challenges with strength instead of fear. As you continue practicing this way of living, your relationships deepen, because you are no longer seeking happiness through others, but sharing happiness from within yourself. The more you stop postponing happiness, the more life feels complete, even while it is still unfolding. Because you finally understand that completion is not found in perfect outcomes, but in fully experiencing each imperfect moment. Chapter 8. Find meaning in the ordinary. The greatest mistake people make about meaning is believing it must be found in extraordinary moments, dramatic success, or rare achievements, when in truth the deepest sense of purpose grows quietly inside ordinary days, in simple routines, in small choices, and in the unnoticed moments that make up most of your life. And the moment you stop overlooking these moments, your entire experience of living begins to change. Most of life happens in the space between milestones, in the mornings that repeat, the work that seems unremarkable, the conversations that feel familiar, and the evenings that arrive without ceremony. And when you dismiss these moments as unimportant, you dismiss the very substance of your existence. Finding meaning in the ordinary begins with attention, because when you truly notice what is happening, the texture of life reveals itself, and what once seemed dull becomes rich, what once felt empty becomes full, and what once appeared insignificant becomes essential. When you start paying attention, you realize that meaning is not something you chase, it is something you recognize, and it appears in the way you show up, the care you give, and the presence you bring to whatever is in front of you. The mind often resists this truth because it craves stimulation and drama, convincing you that life must be exceptional to be worthwhile. But this belief keeps you restless and dissatisfied, always waiting for something more, while missing the quiet beauty of what already is. As you slow down and begin honoring the ordinary, your nervous system relaxes, because you are no longer forcing your life to be something it is not, and this relaxation creates a deep sense of peace that feels both stable and nourishing. Ordinary moments become meaningful when you meet them without rushing, without judgment, and without distraction, allowing yourself to be fully present in the simple act of living. You begin noticing the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the rhythm of your breath, the sound of your own footsteps, and the subtle emotions that move through you as the day unfolds. And these details quietly weave a sense of belonging into your life. The more you practice this way of seeing, the less you feel the need to escape your life, because you discover that the life you are trying to escape from is already filled with depth, connection, and quiet wonder. By finding meaning in the ordinary, you reclaim your days, your energy, and your sense of purpose, because you stop postponing life for some future moment and start living fully inside the one that is already here. When you stop searching for meaning in distant goals, you begin to see that purpose has always been embedded in how you live each ordinary moment, in the way you treat people, the care you bring to small tasks, and the attention you give to simple experiences. And this realization removes the pressure to become someone extraordinary in order to feel that your life matters. The ordinary becomes meaningful when you stop rushing through it, because rushing is a form of rejection, a signal to yourself that the present moment is not worthy of your attention. And when you slow down, even briefly, you give life permission to reveal its depth. You begin to understand that meaning is not loud or dramatic. It is subtle and steady, found in consistency, in showing up even when nothing exciting is happening, and in honoring the quiet responsibilities that shape who you are becoming. The repetition you once resisted becomes grounding, because routines provide structure, stability, and rhythm, allowing your mind to settle and your life to feel coherent rather than chaotic. As you grow more present, you realize that meaning does not require constant excitement, and that chasing stimulation often leaves you empty, while simple presence leaves you fulfilled in ways that are difficult to explain but easy to feel. Ordinary conversations become richer when you listen without distraction, because presence turns simple words into connection, and connection gives life its deepest sense of value. You start recognizing that meaning grows through care, through doing small things well, through honoring commitments even when no one is watching, and through being reliable in a world that constantly seeks novelty. The mind gradually releases its addiction to more because it begins to experience sufficiency, realizing that life does not need to be extraordinary to be meaningful. It only needs to be lived consciously. As this awareness deepens, your anxiety about wasting your life fades, because you see that life is not measured by milestones alone, but by how fully you inhabit each day. By learning to value the ordinary, you stop living in anticipation and start living in participation, and this shift quietly transforms your entire experience of being alive. Chapter 9. Build peace in the present moment. Building peace in the present moment begins with understanding that peace is not something you earn after solving every problem in your life, but something you cultivate through the way you relate to what is happening right now. And this shift in understanding immediately softens your inner world, because you stop waiting for life to become perfect before you allow yourself to feel calm and whole. Most people unknowingly postpone peace by believing it belongs in the future, after they fix enough, achieve enough, or control enough. But this belief traps them in constant mental tension, because the mind is always chasing the next condition while the present remains neglected, leaving them exhausted and disconnected from their own lives. When you choose to build peace in the present moment, you begin by noticing how often your attention escapes into worries about tomorrow or regrets about yesterday, and how rarely it rests fully in now, where your life is actually unfolding, and this awareness becomes the doorway back into your own experience. As your attention returns to the present, your breathing naturally deepens, your body relaxes, and your thoughts lose their urgency, because the nervous system finally receives the message that it is safe to slow down, and this physiological shift becomes the foundation of real inner peace. The present moment becomes more welcoming as you stop judging it against expectations, allowing it to be what it is without resistance, and this acceptance creates a gentle stability that supports you even when circumstances are uncertain or challenging. Peace grows each time you release the habit of fighting reality, because resistance is the main source of inner conflict, and when you stop demanding that life conform to your preferences, your heart and mind begin working together instead of against each other. As you practice staying present, you begin noticing the small details of your life that once went unnoticed: the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of sunlight, the sound of movement around you. And these simple experiences quietly anchor you in the here and now, strengthening your sense of belonging within your own existence. You start responding to difficulties with greater clarity, because you are no longer reacting from fear or imagination, but from awareness and steadiness. And this calm response allows you to navigate challenges with intelligence instead of emotional chaos. The more you remain in the present, the less power your worries have over you, because most worry exists in a future that is not here. And as you withdraw your attention from that future, anxiety begins to lose its grip. Building peace in the present moment is not about eliminating problems, but about changing your relationship with them so they no longer control your inner world, allowing you to remain grounded and whole regardless of what is happening around you. As your awareness stabilizes in the present, you begin to recognize how much of your suffering was created by your refusal to stay with what is, and how quickly that suffering dissolves when you stop running from the moment and allow yourself to meet it with openness and patience. You start noticing that peace does not require life to be silent, slow, or simple, but only that you remain internally available to whatever is happening, because peace is not the absence of activity, it is the absence of inner resistance. The more you practice returning to the present, the more your mind learns to release its grip on control, and this release creates emotional space, allowing you to breathe more freely inside your own life. Your body responds to this change with greater balance. As muscles soften, breathing steadies, and tension dissolves, because your nervous system is no longer preparing for battles that exist only in your imagination. Staying present teaches you how to listen deeply, not just to others, but to yourself, recognizing your own needs, limits, and rhythms. And this listening becomes the foundation of self-respect and emotional health. You become less reactive as you build peace in the present, because you no longer allow every thought or feeling to pull you into conflict, choosing instead to observe, understand, and respond with awareness. Each moment of presence strengthens your inner stability, because you stop depending on external conditions to regulate your emotions, learning instead how to remain centered regardless of circumstances. Your confidence grows quietly, because you trust your ability to remain grounded even when life feels unpredictable, and this trust becomes a powerful source of calm. As peace becomes familiar, your mind stops searching for escape, because it finally feels safe where it is. And this safety allows you to engage with life more fully and authentically. By continuing to build peace in the present moment, you reclaim your life from worry, fear, and distraction, and return to the only place where real living occurs, which is here and now. Chapter 10. Happiness is a way of living, not a destination. Happiness becomes a struggle the moment you treat it as a destination, because destinations imply that something is missing now and that your life will only begin after you arrive somewhere else. And this belief quietly trains your mind to reject the present while chasing a future that never fully satisfies. Most people organize their lives around the idea of arrival, believing they will finally feel complete when they reach a certain goal, fix enough problems, or become a better version of themselves. Yet each time they achieve something, the feeling fades, because happiness was never meant to be found at the end of the road, but lived along the way. When you understand that happiness is a way of living, your entire relationship with life shifts, because you stop postponing your well-being and start cultivating it in the small choices you make each day, through presence, gratitude, patience, and the way you treat yourself and others. Living this way releases you from the exhausting pressure of constant striving, because you are no longer racing toward a future moment where you will finally allow yourself to be at peace, and this release creates space for calm, clarity, and quiet contentment to grow naturally. You begin noticing that happiness is not something you chase, but something that flows from how you meet each moment, whether with resistance or with acceptance, with fear or with trust, with presence or with distraction. As you practice this way of living, your days become richer, because you stop rushing through them toward imagined milestones and start experiencing them fully, allowing simple moments to carry depth and meaning. Your relationships deepen when happiness becomes a way of living, because you no longer expect others to create your emotional fulfillment, but bring your own sense of wholeness into every connection. Work becomes more meaningful because you stop using it as a ladder to climb toward happiness and start using it as an expression of who you are, allowing purpose to emerge from engagement rather than outcome. You become more resilient because your happiness no longer collapses when plans fail or circumstances change. And this emotional stability gives you strength to navigate uncertainty with grace. When happiness becomes your way of living, you realize that nothing is missing from your life in this moment, because fulfillment no longer waits at the end of some journey. It unfolds in the way you choose to walk the path. As you continue living this way, you stop measuring your life by how far you've gone and start valuing how deeply you're living. And this change alone removes a massive weight from your mind, because you are no longer comparing your present to some imagined future where everything is finally right. You discover that happiness grows from attention, from noticing what is already here, from allowing yourself to feel alive inside ordinary moments, instead of rushing past them in search of something more impressive or more complete. This awareness transforms your mornings, your work, your conversations, and even your quiet moments, because you are no longer using them merely as steps toward a future, but experiencing them as meaningful parts of your life. You begin to understand that happiness is not fragile when it is built this way, because it no longer depends on success, praise, or perfect conditions, but on your ability to remain present and open within whatever is unfolding. Your confidence becomes steadier, because you are no longer living under the pressure of needing to arrive somewhere before you are allowed to feel at peace. And this steadiness allows you to face challenges with clarity instead of fear. The more you practice this way of living, the more you realize how much of your suffering came from waiting to be happy, and how unnecessary that suffering was once you stopped postponing your own life. Your relationships become richer because you bring presence instead of expectation, and connection instead of need, creating space for genuine closeness to grow naturally. You start trusting life more deeply, not because everything goes according to plan, but because your well-being no longer depends on the outcome of each situation. This trust frees you from constant anxiety about the future, allowing your energy to return to the present where your real life is happening. As happiness becomes your way of living, your entire experience of being alive feels lighter, steadier, and more meaningful, even when life remains imperfect and uncertain. In the end, happiness does not arrive when life finally becomes flawless. It arrives when you stop demanding that it be. The search for perfection keeps you constantly reaching, constantly waiting, constantly unsatisfied. But peace begins when you release the need to control every detail and allow life to unfold as it is. You don't need better circumstances to feel better inside. You need a different relationship with the moment you are living in right now. When you stop measuring your life against impossible standards, you begin to experience it more fully, more gently, and more honestly. Let yourself breathe. Let yourself be human. Let yourself live without the weight of perfection on your shoulders. Because the life you are waiting for is not hiding in some flawless future. It is already here, in this imperfect moment. Choose presence, choose peace, and allow happiness to meet you where you are.